At my brother's wedding, my dad leaned into the microphone, still holding his champagne glass, and said, "We always knew Derek would be the one to make us proud. Some kids just have it. Others..." He paused, looked directly at me across the room, and smiled. "Others are still figuring it out." The whole ballroom laughed. I was 24 years old, sitting at table 11. The one near the kitchen, next to my dad's coworkers and a cousin I hadn't seen since I was 9. Not at the family table. Not in any of the official photos. And now, not even in the joke. I smiled. I picked up my water glass. And somewhere between that moment and the drive home, I made a decision I didn't fully understand until years later. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a house where the rules were never written down, but everyone understood them anyway. Derek was the golden one. 4 years older than me, varsity soccer, dean's list at Ohio State, the kind of son people meant when they said, "You should be proud." My parents were proud. Loudly, constantly, in the specific way that makes the other kid in the room feel like furniture. I wasn't a bad student. I got B's, sometimes A's, when I cared enough. I ran track for 2 years before I quit because my coach kept forgetting my name. I had friends. I had a part-time job at a coffee shop on 5th Street by the time I was 16. I paid for my own prom dress. None of it counted for much at home. My mom, and I say this without drama, just as fact, had a way of talking about Derek that made everything else in the room go quiet. His name had a different weight when she said it. "Derek called today. Derek got a promotion. Derek's thinking about buying a house." She'd light up in a way that I stopped expecting her to light up for me somewhere around middle school. My dad was worse, honestly, because he was less obvious about it. He'd ask Derek about his job, his plans, his girlfriend. He'd ask me if I'd figured out what I wanted to do yet. I was 22 when he last asked me that. I had a full-time job in accounting at a firm downtown. It didn't register as real to him the way Derek's career in finance registered as real. I don't think they meant to do it. That's the part that took me the longest to understand. That you can damage someone without ever intending to, just by paying attention to the wrong things for long enough. But here's what I know for certain. By the time I was sitting at table 11 in a bridesmaid dress I'd paid $300 for, I'd been quietly disappearing in my own family for years. And that night, my dad made it a punchline. His name is Derek. Her name is Melissa. They got married on a Saturday in September at a venue outside Columbus. The kind of place with a barn aesthetic and Edison lights and a catering menu that starts at $90 a plate. I know the price because I was asked to contribute to the wedding costs. My parents were covering most of it, but every little bit helps, sweetheart. I gave $500. I put it on my credit card because my savings that month were thin. I flew in from Chicago. I'd moved there 2 years earlier for work. And I stayed at my parents' house the Thursday and Friday before the wedding. 2 days of my mom asking whether I was seeing anyone, whether I'd thought about moving back, whether I'd put on a little weight. 2 days of my dad telling Derek stories over dinner while I passed the bread basket and waited to be included in a conversation that never quite opened up for me. On the morning of the wedding, my mom asked if I could help with setup at the venue. Derek was getting ready with his groomsmen. She needed someone to arrange centerpieces and coordinate with the florist. I said yes. I spent 4 hours on my feet in a parking lot in September heat, directing strangers and signing for flower deliveries, and then I went back to the bridal suite and helped Melissa's mom bustle her dress. I wasn't a bridesmaid, by the way. I want to be clear about that. I was Derek's sister, which apparently qualified me to do labor but not to stand at the altar. The reception seating had me at table 11. My parents, Derek, Melissa, and both sets of grandparents were at the head table. Melissa's siblings were at table 2, right up front. I was near the kitchen, with people I barely knew, and I remember thinking, is this a mistake? Did someone get the chart wrong? I checked the little printed card twice. Claire, table 11. It wasn't a mistake. The toast happened about an hour into the reception. My dad stood up, tapped his glass, and the room went quiet the way rooms do when a father is about to say something about his son on the best day of his son's life. He talked about Derek playing soccer as a kid. He talked about Derek's work ethic, his character, how he'd always known Derek would build something good. He talked about Melissa like he'd chosen her himself, like she was the final proof that his son had done everything right. And then he said it. We always knew Derek would be the one to make us proud. Some kids just have it. He looked at me, smiled. The pause was just long enough. Others are still figuring it out. Laughter. Genuine, easy laughter from people who had no idea who I was or what that sentence meant. My dad raised his glass to Derek and Melissa. I raised mine. My hand was steady. I'm still a little proud of that. I didn't make a scene. I want to say that up front because I know that's what people wonder. What did you do? Did you say something? Did you walk out right then? No. I sat through the rest of the reception. I danced once with my dad's coworker named Phil, who had 3 glasses of wine and genuinely meant well. I ate the salmon. I watched Derek and Melissa cut the cake. Around 9 o'clock, I told my mom I was heading out early flight, I said. Which wasn't true. She kissed my cheek and said it was so good to have you here. Like I was a guest. Like I had flown in from another country and this had been a pleasant visit. I drove back to my parents' house, packed my bag, and booked a hotel room near the airport for the next 2 nights. I didn't want to wake up in that house. I didn't trust myself to sit across from my dad at the breakfast table and be normal about what had happened. I lay in the hotel room that night. A Hampton Inn off I-270? The kind of place with thin curtains and ice machines down the hall. And I thought about the last 10 years. The dinners where Derek's news was news and mine was small talk. The Christmas where my dad gave Derek a check to help with his down payment and gave me a gift card to Target. The graduation. My own college graduation, 4 years earlier, where my parents had shown up late and left before dinner because Derek had a soccer tournament out of town that weekend. I thought about the centerpieces I'd arranged that morning, the florist I'd managed, the $500 on my credit card, and I thought, I am done. Not in a dramatic way. Not crying, not with a speech forming in my head, just a quiet, final, this is over feeling. Like a door closing slowly in an empty room. I went back to Chicago on Sunday. I did not text my mom that I got home safe. She didn't text to ask. For the first few weeks, I waited to feel guilty. That's the thing about pulling back from family. Every instinct you have says you're doing something wrong. You're being selfish. You're overreacting. I'd spent 24 years being told, in ways both explicit and not, that my feelings were outsized, that I was too sensitive, that I couldn't take a joke, so I waited for that voice to win. It didn't. Instead, something happened that I hadn't expected. I got quieter in a good way. My apartment felt calmer. I stopped spending Sunday evenings dreading the weekly family call. I stopped mentally preparing rebuttals to things my dad hadn't said yet. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner. I started running again. Just for me. Just because I liked the way the lakefront looked in the early morning. I told my 2 closest friends what had happened. One of them, Jade, who I'd known since college and who had her own complicated family history, sat across from me at a diner on Belmont and said, "You know you don't actually owe them a relationship, right? Like, legally, financially, emotionally. You don't owe them anything." I knew that intellectually. It took longer to believe it the way you believe things that are actually true. The holidays were the hardest. Thanksgiving, the first year, I spent at Jade's family's place in Michigan. Her mom piled food on my plate and asked about my job and actually listened to my answer. and I had to excuse myself for 5 minutes because I didn't know what to do with that kind of attention. Christmas, I stayed in Chicago. I told my mom I had plans. She asked what plans. I said I had a Friendsgiving situation that had extended, which was vague enough to be unkillable. She said, "That's too bad, we'll miss you." I said, "Merry Christmas, Mom." I hung up and watched a movie and ordered Thai food and felt fine. Not great, but fine. Fine was enough. The second year was easier. The third year felt almost normal. I got promoted at work, senior accountant, better salary. A small team reporting to me. I signed a lease on a new apartment in Lincoln Square. 1 bedroom with actual south-facing windows and enough room for a real dining table. I started therapy, which I mention not because it's dramatic, but because it was the most useful thing I did in those 5 years, and I think people should know that going to therapy when you have a functional life is allowed. My therapist, a woman named Dr. O.C., who had the most neutral face I have ever seen on a human being, helped me understand something I'd been circling for years. I had learned to make myself smaller so my family felt bigger. I had learned to not want things loudly because wanting things loudly in that house meant having them compared unfavorably to Derek's wants, Derek's achievements, Derek's trajectory. "What do you actually want?" she asked me once, about 6 months in. I thought about it for a long time. "I want to stop checking to see if they've noticed me yet," I finally said. She nodded. "That's a good answer." It took another 1.5 years before I stopped checking. My brother called me twice in those 5 years. The first time was about 8 months in, my mom's birthday, which I had acknowledged with a card and a phone call but no visit. He said, "Mom's upset you didn't come home." I said I'd been busy. He said, "She's not going to say it, but she's hurt." I said I was sorry to hear that. He said, "Come on, Claire," and then stopped himself because my name is not Claire, and he'd forgotten that for a moment, which told me everything I needed to know about how present I was in their daily lives. My actual name is Sylvia. He called me the wrong name. I let it go. We hung up. The second call was 2 years later. He was having some financial trouble, something about a bad investment, a business idea that hadn't landed the way he'd expected. He didn't ask for money directly. He said things like, "It's been a rough stretch, and we're managing in a way that was clearly designed to make me offer." I said, "I hope things turn around for you." He waited. I waited longer. Eventually he said, "Yeah, well, take care of yourself." We hung up. I sat with that for a while. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me remembered the centerpieces and the table 11 and the $500 on my credit card. Part of me thought about others are still figuring it out that had been said to me, about me in rooms I was standing right in the middle of. I didn't call back. My mom called on a Tuesday in March, 5 years and 5 months after the wedding. I almost didn't pick up. I was in the middle of a report for work, and her name on my screen felt like a rock dropping into still water. But I picked up, because I am still someone who picks up the phone. She said, "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice was different. Thinner, somehow. I said, "Hey, Mom, what's up?" She said, "It's about your brother." Derek and Melissa had been struggling. I didn't know this. I hadn't known much about their lives in 5 years by design. But apparently things had been difficult for a while. The financial trouble Derek had hinted at during that second phone call had gotten worse. They'd sold the house. They were renting. Melissa had gone back to work full-time. They had 2 kids now, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and the strain of everything had cracked something between them. My mom wasn't saying they were getting divorced. She was saying they needed help. She was saying my dad's health had been declining. A heart thing, early stages, manageable but real, and that she was stretched thin. She was saying Derek was proud and wouldn't ask, and Melissa was drowning, and could I maybe come home for a bit? I listened to all of it. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Mom, I need to ask you something." She said, "Okay." I said, "At Derek's wedding, Dad's toast. Do you remember what he said about me?" A pause. "He was just making a joke, sweetheart." "I know that's what it felt like to you," I said, "but I was sitting at table 11, and I had spent the whole morning arranging centerpieces, and I had put $500 on my credit card to contribute to a wedding where I wasn't even in the family photos. And Dad looked at me in front of a room full of strangers and made me the punchline. And then everyone laughed, and you didn't say anything." She was quiet. "I'm not telling you this to punish you," I said. "I'm telling you because you're asking me to show up right now, and I think you deserve to know why showing up hasn't felt possible for me." She said, "I didn't realize." "I know," I said. "That's sort of the whole thing." We stayed on the phone for another 20 minutes. She cried a little. I didn't, which surprised me. I thought I would. But I'd cried about this already, in hotel rooms and therapists' offices, and once in a parking garage in the middle of a Tuesday for no reason I could explain in the moment. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just clear. I did not go home. Not right away, and not the way she was asking. What I did, I found a family therapist in Columbus, someone I researched myself, someone with experience in estrangement and family systems, and I told my mom that if she and my dad wanted a relationship with me, that was where we would start. Not a holiday visit. Not a phone call where we pretended the last 5 years were a misunderstanding. A real conversation with someone trained to hold it. My mom said she'd talk to my dad. My dad called me 3 days later. He sounded like a man who had been asked to do something he didn't fully understand but was willing to try. He said, "Your mom says you want us to talk to someone." I said yes. He said, "Is this about the toast?" I said it was about a lot of things, and the toast was one of them. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I didn't mean it the way it came out." I said, "I know." But it came out that way anyway, in front of 150 people, and I'd been carrying that for 5 years. And honestly, it wasn't the first time I'd felt that way. It was just the first time it happened in public. Another pause. "I don't know how to fix that," he said. "That's why I want to go to therapy," I said. "Because I don't know either." We did 3 sessions, all of them over video because I was in Chicago and they were in Dayton, and the therapist, a Dr. Anand, who had the energy of someone who had seen everything and was not impressed by any of it in the best possible way, was in Columbus. The sessions were hard. My dad said things that frustrated me. I said things that frustrated him. My mom cried more than either of us. Dr. Anand kept asking my dad to reflect back what he heard me saying, which my dad was genuinely bad at the first 2 times and slightly better at by the third. But something shifted, not fixed. I want to be careful with that word, because I think people use fixed to mean back to normal, and I was never going to go back to normal, because normal for us had been this. But something became possible that hadn't been possible before. My dad said in the 3rd session, "I think I treated you like you were resilient and didn't need the same things Derek needed, and I think I was wrong about that." Dr. Anand looked at me. She didn't say anything. I said, that's it. That's exactly it. It's been 8 months since that phone call from my mom. My brother is still working through his stuff. His marriage is still intact, as far as I know, though it's not my business to know much about it. I sent Melissa a text a few months ago. "Nothing big, just thinking of you. Hope things are getting easier." She wrote back a smiley face and "Thank you, it means a lot." That was enough. I visited my parents in February. 3 days. I stayed in a hotel, not out of hostility, just because I sleep better in my own space and I'm old enough now to know that about myself. We had dinner 2 nights. My dad grilled, which is his love language when he doesn't have other words. My mom made the corn casserole I've liked since I was a kid. On the last night, before I drove back to the airport, my dad walked me out to the car. He's slower now, with the heart thing. Not dramatically, but enough that you notice. He put my bag in the trunk and then stood there for a second. He said, "I'm glad you came." I said, "Me too." It wasn't a movie moment. He didn't apologize with a speech. I didn't forgive him in some clean, complete way that tied everything up. We're not that kind of family, and honestly, I'm not sure I trust that kind of resolution anymore. It always looks better from the outside than it feels from the inside. But he put my bag in the trunk. And I said, "Me too." And for now, that's the thing I'm holding on to. I've thought a lot about what I would tell someone who's where I was 5 years ago. Sitting in a Hampton Inn, not texting their mom. Trying to figure out if the quiet is peace or just the sound of something breaking. Here's what I actually know. Leaving isn't the same as giving up. Sometimes leaving is the only way to figure out who you are without someone else's disappointment as the backdrop. You don't have to accept a relationship on terms that hurt you. Not with parents, not with siblings, not with anyone. And going back, if you go back, should be on terms that you set. Not because someone needs you, not because holidays are coming, because you've decided, clearly and with both eyes open, that this is what you want to do. I went back because I decided to, not because my mom cried on the phone, not because my brother's life didn't turn out the way my dad's toast promised it would, not because I felt guilty, or small, or like I still had something to prove. I went back because I finally had enough of myself to share a little without losing any. That's not a perfect ending, but it's mine, and I have never, not once, fit neatly at table 11. I've thought about cause and effect a lot since that night at the wedding, not in a cosmic, everything happens for a reason way. I don't believe in that. I believe in something simpler and harder, that what we do to people has weight, that weight goes somewhere, and eventually it lands. My dad spent years making me feel like the footnote in a story that was really about Derek. He didn't do it with cruelty. That's the part I had to sit with in therapy for a long time. He did it with inattention, with laughter at the wrong moment, with a champagne glass raised in the wrong direction, and those small repeated moments built something in me that took years to dismantle. A belief that I wasn't quite worth full attention. That my life was the B-plot, that showing up and doing the work quietly was somehow less than showing up loudly and being celebrated for it. What I know now is that the way people treat you teaches you how to treat yourself. And I had learned, without anyone sitting me down and saying the words, that I should expect less. Ask for less. Need less. Make less noise. Leaving wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a declaration. It was just me in a Hampton Inn off the highway, deciding I was done performing smallness for people who never asked me to be anything else. That decision, quiet as it was the most important thing I did in my 20s. Not the promotion. Not the apartment with the south-facing windows. The decision to stop shrinking. And here's the thing about standing back up after you've been bent low for a long time. You find out what you're actually made of. Not because anyone tests you. Because you test yourself. Every day. Just by choosing not to go back to something that hurt you. Jade saw it before I did. Dr. Anand helped me name it. But I had to be the one to live it. One ordinary Tuesday at a time. Until ordinary Tuesdays started to feel like enough. My dad said in that third therapy session that he thought I was resilient. That he thought I didn't need the same things Derek needed. I've thought about that a lot. Resilience is a word people use to justify not protecting someone. It means you survived. It doesn't mean you should have had to. The most honest thing I can say is this. I didn't come back to my family because I forgave them in some clean, complete way. I came back because I'd built enough of a life that I could afford to. I had enough self-respect that a difficult dinner didn't undo me anymore. I had enough clarity that I could sit across from my dad, watch him grill chicken in the backyard, and hold two things at once: the hurt of what was and the possibility of what might still be. That's not a lesson anyone handed me. It's something I figured out slowly, through 5 years of quiet work, bad days, good runs along the lake, and a lot of conversations with a therapist who had the most neutral face I've ever seen. Some kids just have it. Others figure it out. Turns out figuring it out is its own kind of having it.